So this book, you can get a copy outside, forward by Jeremy Irons. I was very excited by that. Jeremy Irons, if you haven't seen it, hosts this film, Trashed, and that's why we called the subtitle for the book is Untrashing the Planet, One Community at a Time. And this is a very special day because many of the people that contributed greatly to this book are in this room. We had guest essays from Neil. Perhaps you'd stand up when I mention your name, because there's a reason for this. Neil Selman there. No, stand up so they can see you, because I hope they're going to find you in a moment. Neil Selman, Mary Lou DeVento at the back there. Yeah, wave, that's it. Buddy Boyd, you know Buddy, and Barbara. Gary Liss, Gary, if you would stand up. Rick Anthony, you know him already. Jeffrey Morris is not here. Helen Spiegelman, is she here? Yes. Yeah, good. Helen, very good. Eric Lombardi, Bill Sheehan, Rossano Occhialini is here from Italy. And, okay, so all those people, you could make this book, if you're interested, into a bit of a collector's item, because I very much doubt anybody will be able to get all the signatures of these people that contributed to this book. Now, I've signed them all already, but in the cover page, the earlier cover page, you can get all the signatures of those people today, if you can find them again. And also, whilst we're at it, Paul Martinson, would you stand up? Paul Martinson from Sweden contributed many of the lovely photographs, some of which you're going to see in a moment. So let's get Paul's name there as well, and I'm sure there are people I've forgotten. Anyway, let's go on. So today, say a few words about sustainability, 10 steps to zero waste, the fourth R, linking zero waste with other steps to sustainability, and lastly, the fifth R, So a few words about sustainability. We would need 4 planets if everybody consumed like an American. We would need 2 planets if everybody consumed like a European. Meanwhile, India and China are copying our consumption patterns with the results that you heard earlier on about air pollution. So obviously, something has got to change, and for me, the best place to make that change is with waste, because every single human being, except the very poor, make waste every day. And if we can, if given good political leadership, they can all be part of this movement, not just to zero waste, but a movement towards sustainability. And as far as sustainability is concerned, every ton of waste that we landfill or incinerate takes us in the wrong direction. But every ton that we compost, every ton that we reuse, every ton that we recycle or avoid takes us in the right direction. The modern incinerator or gasifier or plasma arc or any other stupid name that they come up with because they daren't use their own name, trash incinerators, is attempting to perfect a bad idea. Our task in the 21st century is not to find better ways to destroy discarded materials. Our task is to stop making products and packages that have to be destroyed. And that's what zero waste is about. So the waste problem will not be solved with better technology. My apologies to engineers who are searching for that magic machine. It's going to be solved with better organization, better education, and better industrial design. So the 10 steps to zero waste. Now, some of you have heard me talk before, perhaps too many times. This is a little different. This is a multi-color presentation with lots and lots of photographs to illustrate. This is a glorious global movement, full of color. You know, Pete Seeger died this year, one of my favorite people. And one of his less familiar songs is the one that goes, one blue sky above us, one ocean lapping on our shore, one earth so green and round, who could ask for anything more? My rainbow-colored race, it's too soon to die. And what we're talking about is there's not going to be left much of this planet if we just let the leaders of our populations to continue with business as usual, which is what they're going to do. And I'm talking about the leaders of our country and the leaders of our corporation. And the only change, the only way we can make a difference is at the grassroots. And this is a grassroots movement. It's not a movement to make lots and lots of money for a few people. It's a movement to take back our resources, to take back our communities. So there are the 10 steps. Learn them quickly: source separation, door-to-door collection, etc., etc., etc. And now I'm going to go through them one at a time with as many illustrations from as many different countries as I can. And I urge you, if you are missing from this list, please send me some photographs, and I'll try to make amends next time round. So step 1 is source separation. These 10 things make waste by mixing. And these 10 things can separate and keep resources. Step 2, door-to-door collection. And of course, the first one I think of is San Francisco. San Francisco with the 3 containers picked up once a week. And then Italy. You're going to hear Italy a lot. Italy in Capanari. Capanari. Notice how to pronounce that, because you're going to need to say this name many times. It's one of the great beacons. In Italian, you put the emphasis on the 3rd syllable from the end of the word. So it's Capanori. Capanori. I've heard all kinds of pronunciations of that. Anyway, they pick up, the same trucks pick up different materials on different days. So you can tell the day of the week by the color of the container on the side of the street. In Castelmonte in Sicily, this is one of my favorites, Castelmonte. They're using donkeys to collect the recyclables. Now, as you see, here's a picture of the city with the castle in the middle there, very narrow streets. And so here's the guy with the donkeys picking up the separated recyclables. This donkey is a great hit with the residents who feed them and the tourists. But it's a marvelous thing. This man was an alcoholic. He didn't show up for work most days. But after these donkeys, he's getting so much respect and so much interest from the tourists. I don't think he's missed a day's work since this donkeys were started use here. And it just underlines the fact that when we talk about zero waste, we're thinking of materials, recovering materials. But what we really should be thinking about is that we're recovering people. People from the catadores in Spain, the waste pickers in India, and throughout the world in the jobs that can be created, all of which will be lost in smoke if we build incinerators. Then in Spain, they've copied the Capanari approach. They call it the Italian system. This is in Basque Country with the 4 different containers here. And their novel approach is to have, there are different days, same trucks picking up different materials. Notice here they're picking up organics 3 times a week. Now their novel approach is to have a hook. Each household has a hook with a number on it, and all your containers have that same number. So you put your container, in this case the brown container is for organics. Here you see an international conference. This is the mayor of Hernani. Very, very proud of this system. He should be. This is the brown container up front. You see the number on the hook, the number on the container. If you don't have a wall, then they have special built posts to do the same thing. I'll come back to them a little later. In Wales, some communities are serviced by curb sort vehicles, specially designed vehicles. I love this for slow recycling. You've heard of slow food. This is slow recycling to absolutely maximize the quality and also the convenience. So these special trucks are modularized, so when you fill them up, the depot, they're separated into their different components. But for the householder, it has the simplicity and attraction of like a blue box program, except that the guys hook those on the side of the truck and separate into the different places. As I say, it's slow, but they get high quality stuff. Now the low-tech version of that is run by an organization called Cwm Harry in Pristine in Wales, and there they've converted a electric milk float that used to deliver milk bottles and collect the empties, and they've adapted it for exactly the same purpose. So they go door to door. Now I have a wonderful way of enforcing the separation there. They use the town crier. Oh yay, these people are not separating their waste in such and such a street, and their waste is exhibited in cages for people to see those things. You've heard of transparent bags. Well, here's a transparent truck. You can see the waste that's being produced. And all the proceeds from this program is given to local charities. Now, in Brazil, I've mentioned, we have this recovery of people. These waste pickers have been doing this dirty and dangerous job, as you know, picking in landfills, all ages, and so on. The important thing here is to respect what they're doing, but to give them much better working conditions, to organize them into unions, and to give them a place at the table, give them a position to negotiate, make sure that they have access to these materials in a much cleaner fashion. So here you see the catadores collecting the material house by house, small little things to little carts, which they do. I think this one may be even electric, more carts, and so on. Okay, and in the Philippines, the collection is even simpler than that. Little motorbike there. You need these vehicles with the narrow streets. And there's a little materials recovery facility, a little smaller than the one in San Francisco. And now the sad story, Japan. Japan is a very sad place. At one point, they had 3 times more incinerators than the rest of the world combined, which is extraordinary because the Japanese have an amazing capacity to separate. And you don't need incinerators if people are prepared to separate. The one thing that they didn't get in Japan is to separate, get the clean organics, get them out of the city and compost it, and just leave the city to deal with the paper, glass, metals, and plastic, and so on. And to demonstrate that, in Kamakatsu, they have a wonderful little recycling operation. It's probably the most beautiful location of a recycling operation in the world. The people there are separating into 35 different categories. It's a drop-off container. All the little shops in the area have a zero waste sign outside. Everybody's composting in their backyard. So that's what the Japanese could do if they got better leadership from the Japanese government. Right now, I think they have, 28 incinerators in Tokyo? It's one for every district. You see 12 incinerators when you're traveling between the 2 airports in Japan. A tragedy. And now they're trying to build them. The Japanese are building them in Malaysia and Korea and every country they can get their foothold in. So step 3 then is composting. And again, I want to underline the most important thing about source separation, door-to-door collection, is to get the organics clean, get the organics back into agriculture, keep the carbon trapped so it's not contributing to global warming. And once you get the organics out, it's much easier to handle the rest. So step 3 then, composting. But before we get into composting, don't forget the hierarchy. The first thing to do with food is to feed people if you possibly can. There's a wonderful book, if you haven't read it, it's called The Stop, how a food bank in Toronto became a wonderful, empowering tool for people to compost, for people to cook, for people to grow their own food, to cook and eat together. A wonderful, inspiring book. Please read it, The Stop. Next, if you can't feed people, feed animals, and then if you can't do that, feed the soil. And in terms of composting and vermiculture, let worms do it if you can. First do it in your backyard or on site. If you're an institution, you can get small composting units which seem to work pretty well. Buddy Boyd has one, I think, from Sweden. He can talk to you about it. Community composting. In Zurich, Switzerland, they have 1,000 community compost plots, 1,000. And they're looking after about 50% of the organic waste, in domestic waste, and no cost to the government whatsoever. And when I asked the designer of that program what the best thing was about the program, he says the social ramifications. He said it helps to fight the anonymity of living in a big city when people meet over the compost pile. Interesting. And then, of course, we should be composting on farms. We need to get farmers involved with the zero waste movement, very much so. And then lastly, then you need a centralized composting facility or also anaerobic digestion. In Oxford, in the United Kingdom, they have an operation to recover food before the due date from supermarkets, etc., and get those to low-income families. And the guru for this in-time collection of food from supermarkets and restaurants is Professor Andrea Segre of the Agriculture Department of the University of Bologna. And he's one of the technical advisors, by the way, of Kapaneri's Zero Waste program. In pristine Wales, again, Cwm Harry, they collect all the organic waste locally, make it into compost, apply it to community gardens, and then share the food with the community. I think that's a message you're going to hear more and more. We must grow our own food if we possibly can, in our backyards, in our communities. Hernani in Spain, they too have little community composting arrangements near large apartment buildings. And I want to show you, here's the brown container with the organics. They're doing an absolutely phenomenal job with the quality of this compost. Would you believe that their compost is 99.76% pure organics? It's an amazing achievement. If you get over 95% pure in most programs, you're doing pretty well. In San Francisco, they really put the economic incentive here. They knew that most of the high-quality organic waste in San Francisco was going to come from restaurants and hotels, and they've made it 25% cheaper to put these clean organic containers out compared to mixed waste. And the restaurant staff in these hotels and restaurants are very proud of what they're doing. They're proud of the Zero Waste program in San Francisco. And because this is so important, the city has spent money training the kitchen staff, sending a group of employees out to train the kitchen staff to get the right stuff in the right container. Here's a composting plant in Brazil, and this is the collection vehicles for the composting, collecting the clean organics in San Francisco. Interesting idea. On the truck, they've painted a life-type view of what's inside the truck. Most people don't see what's inside these trucks, but they painted it on the outside so that you can see what they're doing. Here's the composting facility for San Francisco. It's surrounded by farmland, and the farmers are using this compost to grow fruit and vegetables which go back to San Francisco. And 200 vineyards are using the compost to grow the grapes. Not only does the compost nurture the vines, but it also nurtures the cover crops between the vines. They know those plants which absorb nitrogen, get the nitrogen back into the soil. So step 4 then is recycling, very familiar to all of you. In San Francisco, the recycling plant is on Pier 96. Here's a close-up of the building. Inside, you see the separation lines. And here's an exciting thing. 2 things. The company that does this is called Recology. Recology has the collection contract and also owns the composting and the recycling, but doesn't own the landfill. They have absolutely no economic incentive to waste anything, to send anything to their competitor at the landfill, whereas they're making profit on composting and recycling. That's the first bit of good news. The second bit of good news is that the company is owned by the workers. In Brazil, here you see these are the waste pickers operating in a separation shed. Again, much better conditions than they've ever been used to. Here you see the bales being collected and finally being shipped off to market. Step 5, reuse and repair, and eventually we hope these would become community centers. Mary Lou, where are you? Back there. There she is. Thank you. Mary Lou, there she is again. She's done more than protect the environment. She's protecting the language of waste and, well, discards. So this urban ore has been operating for 30 years. It's grossing $3 million a year. And as the director, Dan Knapp, has got a PhD in sociology, his big thing is job creation. So he's not interested in volunteers. He's interested in taking the profits from reuse and creating good jobs doing this. He's got 27 full-time, well-paid jobs. Some of them have worked for him for 25 years. How many? 37. So that's where most of the money goes from the profits. And I think Dan, unless he's changed his mind, is retiring shortly and giving the company over to the workers. They're going to be owning it soon. So here's some of the household goods that people are picking up from urban ore. And it's a very important section on building materials. Dan is a specialist in doors. At one end of the door is worth $20. At the other end, probably $1,000, if you know what you're doing. That's why you need good staff. They know the difference. When I was there once, somebody brought in this junky-looking stove, and within a few minutes it had sold for $750. If you want a toilet, go to San Francisco. And over on the other side of the country, in Burlington, Vermont, they've got a not-for-profit operation called, now it's called Resource. It was called Recycle North. Again, beautiful display of goods. You go into it, looks like a department store, but for second-hand goods. But the extra thing that they're doing is to take people off the streets and train them to repair large appliances or small appliances or electrical goods, even computers. And after 9 months, they give them a certificate and help them to get a job. They're also linked to a deconstruction operation, taking buildings down in the opposite direction that they went up and trying to recover the building materials, not only for new buildings, but also for making new objects. And I don't know if you can read some of the language here. Resource, building material store. Anyway, you can read if you can. I can't. So here's another one of those guys being trained. He's being trained to take wood and make beautiful, from old buildings, and making beautiful new furniture out of that wood. So here's, talk about value added. Compare this to a destruction, what do they call it, demolition company, where this would all be chipped up and probably burnt somewhere to pollute something. But here it's being used again in this beautiful furniture. This is a slide from Rick Anthony, where he did some work for Los Angeles. And here he showed that although reusable items are a small percentage of the total waste stream, discard stream, a small percentage, it's low volume, high value. Compared to recycling, high volume, low value, reuse is low volume, high value, and that 2% then is worth over a third of the total value that we're throwing away. And so it's a wonderful resource to create jobs and small business opportunities. In London, they've put $6 million into building reuse operations throughout the city. Here's the mayor of London. You may recognize that film starlet there. I've forgotten her name. But some of these buildings are purpose-built. Some of them are old buildings renovated. So reuse and repair centers can be used for poverty relief, for job creation, job training, linked to deconstruction businesses, linked to value-added enterprises. Community development. We need to fight over consumption. We need to recreate the village where we human beings are at our best. Recreate the village in the large, anonymous city. If they can do that in Zurich with small community compost, imagine what you could do with these reuse and repair centers throughout the city. And now, for a real bit of fun from the most unlikely place. Sweden is usually so boring on waste management because they build incinerators everywhere. But there's one person in Sweden who is not boring. It's Paul Martinson from Gothenburg, who has produced, or at least the city has produced, this marvelous reuse and repair center. When you go in, there's a band playing. When you go around, there are clowns to entertain the kiddies. When you go to the toilet, it's an art gallery. And fantastic. You can sit there pooping away and looking at the paintings that you're going to buy. And then this is my favorite. This is the famous sorting dog. This dog from Sweden can separate mixed recyclables into 6 different categories. And as I've said in many places, if a dog from Sweden can separate into 6 categories, surely you can get your politicians to separate into 3. And here is Paul presenting a T-shirt for his park to the King of Sweden at the Rio conference a couple of years ago. So, resource recovery parks, one-stop shopping. This is such an exciting concept. Paul is inspiring people all over the world with this type of operation. And I am hoping that we can link it to some of the things that Dan Knapp and Mary Lou DeVenter have been talking about with their 12 different categories and a resource park, and what Buddy Boyd is trying to do in Gibson, and Eric Lombardi has talked about. And that is one-stop shopping. Put everything, all the things that we want to do, into one place and make it an exciting place that people want to visit. So here is Eric Lombardi, looking a little bit like Luciano Pavarotti, a little slimmer than Luciano, but singing a beautiful song. And here is his song, which I'm sure he can flesh out if you want to talk to him. Eric, stand up again, would you? So they can. There's Eric Lombardi. The idea is this, and it's a very practical one. When it comes to big cities, when they put out bids, you know, asking people to bid for their project to handling waste, it's a very big project. And the people that can afford to make these bids are big companies building big machines and big incinerators. And the little companies that are doing very good little things with reuse and repair and deconstruction, everything else, they don't have the budget to do it. But as Eric suggested, if we can make them into consortia, and we can get consultants promoting these consortia to do all the things that you want to do for zero waste in one place, I think, will be much more competitive. So, Eric, I'm hoping you'll talk to people more about that later. So now, back to the six of the steps, 10 steps to zero waste. We have the next steps are going to try to minimize the residual fraction. And step 6 is waste reduction initiatives. In Ireland, the government put a 15-cent tax on plastic shopping bags. Nobody thought that was going to go anywhere, but in 1 year they reduced the use of those bags by 92%. These are the sort of heavy-duty plastic bags used in shopping malls. So in the Philippines, Sonia Mendoza, she's organized here the very beautiful young women who won the beauty contest to push a ban on plastic bags, and she was very eloquent about the need to ban plastic bags, particularly in countries like the Philippines where these bags clog the drains, so when you get rain, there's huge flooding. So get rid of the plastic bags. And guess what? 2 days ago, California banned plastic bags, single-use plastic bags. And, you know, all the best things on the environment always happen first in California, like zero waste. Great, so that's exciting, and other whole countries have banned plastic bags. I was in Bangladesh last October, no plastic bags. So when you went into the rural area, you didn't see these plastic bags clogging up their riverways. That's very important. Ontario, Canada. This is amazing. People say zero waste. How realistic is that? There's a company in Ontario, Canada, that's been zero waste for over 60 years. Zero waste packaging. This is the beer industry. They've been using reusable glass bottles for 60 years. Each bottle goes round 18 times. They're recovering at least 98% of the bottles. The company is saving money on this, and there are 2,000 jobs involved in the collecting and cleaning of these bottles, and it's no cost to the municipalities at all. The packaging is totally internalized by the company. In fact, they recycle more than they put out, because they're also recycling a cardboard from other competitors, other users of liquor bottles and so on. In Italy, back to Italy one more time. Italy, some supermarket chains are allowing customers to refill their own bottles, particularly things like shampoo and detergents where you've got no contamination concerns. And then my favorite store in the whole world is Efficorta in Capano. And there they have 60 taps, taps for detergents, taps for shampoo, taps for milk, water, beer, honey, and olive oil. Oh, and of course, my favorite, vino. You know, you come in here, you grab your glass. And whilst you're doing this, you can see where locally the wine is produced, because all the food items in the store come from 70 kilometers, within 70 kilometers. So 0 kilometers, zero waste, 0 kilometers, 0 emissions, 0 territories. You can see how these movements can come together. And no plastic. If you don't have your own bag, you can buy one made of jute or cotton, but not plastic. And in the schools, Rossano, where's Rossano? Rossano, stand up, Rossano. This man is incredible. He won the Goldman Prize last year for Europe, presented in California at the San Francisco Opera House, and the best thing that happened there is he didn't sing. One of the worst voices in the whole world, but anyway, that's another story. But he's a primary school teacher, and one of the things he's done is to yank all the plastics out of the school. They eat off china, stainless steel, and glass, and yes, they drink tap water, not bottled water. Now, you can do that in Italy. You know why? Because they don't fluoridate their water, unlike the stupid Americans who fluoridate their water. British Columbia is practically no fluoridation. I think Prince George, you've got fluoridation, but in most places in British Columbia, you're sensible and you haven't poisoned yourself with fluoride. End of that plug. Next. And here's the Zero Waste Baby. Zero Waste Baby, reusable Panolini diapers, Pampers, instead of throwaway Pampers. Step 7, economic incentives. The pay-as-you-throw system, the pay-by-bag system. So obviously your waste is covered by the local tax system, whatever that is, but no surcharge for the compostables, no surcharge for the recyclables, but the residual fraction, the more you make, the more you pay. And in Villafranchi d'Asti, population of 3,000, they went from 70% diversion from disposal through landfills or incinerators to 85%, just simply using this pay-by-bag system. And the expert on that is Roberto Cavallo. He's a wonderful fellow. He's written several books already, and that's his email address. If you want to know how to get around the Italian tax system and still do this, he's the man to do it. Now, this can get a little technical and complicated. In Capanari, they have a chip in the bags. So I guess they can weigh this, and the chip records how much residuals that they made. Now, that may be one way to go, but I thought that Seattle's approach many years ago was a very, very simple one and very elegant one. At the time the program was rolled out, they allowed the citizens to choose the size of the container for the residuals. So if you chose a small one, your monthly payment was less than if you chose a middle-sized one or a big one. The more you make, the more you pay. That, I think, is a very elegant system, and the citizen can choose whether to make a lot of waste and pay a lot of money or make little waste and not pay so much money. So there we've got to our first 7 steps then, and now we come to step 8, the most important step to get closer to zero waste. We've got communities over 80% with those first 7 steps. But Nova Scotia in Canada has given us another step to take. Now, first of all, I want to say something about what they did in Nova Scotia, which is very important to us. It's very important, if we're serious about zero waste, is to get the politicians and the bureaucrats working with the activists. We're not the enemy. The citizens are not the enemy unless they build incinerators, and then the politicians are going to find what an enemy we are. But we all have an interest in solving this problem. We need to work together. Now, this is David Wimberley. He's a flute maker by trade, and he heads up a group called It's Not Garbage Coalition. And he worked very closely with Barry Friesen, the bureaucrat. And between them, they came up with this plan for Nova Scotia. Amongst other things, they have about 100 enviro depots scattered around the province where people can take back their deposit containers and get some money back. And the deposit's on every liquid except milk. So liquor, soft drinks, juices, and beer, of course, all have a surcharge on them, which you get back. You get half of it back, and the other half goes to the government to finance some of the recycling and research programs. And not only can you drop off the deposit containers, but some will also handle some of the household hazardous waste, like batteries, fluorescent bulbs, and so on. Nice system. And then every week, every Saturday morning, citizens can drive into a drop-off place for their household toxics. And in this system, you don't even have to get out of your car. You just open up the trunk, and volunteers pull out the hazardous waste, household hazardous waste, and then safely store it into different categories to be picked up by a hazardous waste company a little bit later. Now, the most exciting thing about this Nova Scotia program is they built in front of the landfill a residual separation facility in front of the landfill. And no waste can go directly into the landfill. It must go first to the screening facility. So here is the Otter Lake landfill outside Halifax. There's the separation facility up there, and you notice the road is coming into the separation facility, but not into the landfill. So here's a close-up of that operation. The bottom section is where the separation goes on. The section between the two buildings is a conveyor belt, and then the second top building is the composting operation for the dirty organics, and you see the curing area behind, and you see the landfill at the top. Now inside, when the bags come in, the bags of residuals, they're opened up in a non-destructive way. The materials first go under a magnet and then are separated by well-protected workers. So they pull out more recyclables and more toxics. The dirty organic fraction, things like kitty litter and diapers, are not touched. It goes all the way to the end of the conveyor belt. There it is in that center there. And then it is shredded, and the shredded material, a lot of plastics, a lot of diapers and things. And then in these troughs, and along these troughs, there's a turning machine which shifts the material 10 feet each day, aerates it. After 18 days, it's being composted, and out it goes for a little bit of curing. Not to produce a product to sell, because this is dirty, dirty stuff, but to stabilize it biologically above ground so it does less damage below ground with leachate, methane production, odors, and so on. And that's what the landfill looks like today. And the major development that we're waiting for now is for somebody to put inside such a building a zero waste research center. So we need the Zero Waste Research Center to study our mistakes, our industrial design mistakes, study the bad packaging, the bad products. And I would split it between two buildings. I would have the Zero Waste Research Center that focuses on bad packaging in the residual screening, and the research focusing on bad product design at the Reuse and Repair Center. So I'd like to see our professors and students getting their hands dirty. This is a laboratory. If they're concerned about sustainability, this is where you can study our non-sustainable waste or designing of products. This, in fact, is where community responsibility and industrial responsibility come face to face. And the message we need to send to industry is, if we can't reuse it, if we can't recycle it, if we can't compost it, industry shouldn't be making it. And this is the difference between those wretched politicians in Vancouver who think that you can combine zero waste with incineration, which is utter poppycock, since they're going in the opposite direction. This is the difference. The people, these politicians in Vancouver who say they've got a zero waste strategy, for them, what they want to do is to make the residuals disappear. They want to make our bad industrial design of packaging disappear in smoke. The zero waste approach is to make the residual fraction very, very visible, because this is what we have to change if we're going to get to zero waste. And this is a big difference. Hitherto, we've approached this on the basis of what the community can do, regardless of what stupid crap industry sends our way. And what we're saying, no, we've got to have a combination of community responsibility and industrial responsibility. So to put this onto one page, zero waste is community responsibility, the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, recycle, and don't forget compost. And industrial responsibility, the 4th R,